Hello, and welcome to the Fabric Spotlight. In our Spotlight talks, we speak with cloud influencers on all things cloud, infrastructure, entrepreneurship, and beyond. Today, my guest is Harish Grama, General Manager at IBM Cloud. Hi, Harish. Thank you for speaking with me today.
Hi Prabakar. Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great, great. So before we kind of like get rolling with all the other things, it would be good to kind of get a bit of the background for the audience. So if you could share a bit about your journey before joining IBM and all the experiences along the way, that would be great.
Oh, sure. So I actually have been a long time IBMer. I started with IBM as a contractor or the contract programmer back in the mid 90s. And then I became an employee, worked in software, several divisions. People know WebSphere and our databases and Tivoli, Lotus, etc. So I worked in many different divisions, software divisions in IBM. I built the original version of the cloud, or led the team that built it. In 2016, I left to run basically a cloud transformation for a large US bank.
Right.
And then in 2018, I came back to IBM to lead our cloud division. So that's kind of what I've done.
So you have kind of like experienced both sides of the fence, if you will. So we'll come back to that. I do want to talk to you a little bit more about that. But kind of first about IBM. So in the cloud, talking about IBM Cloud, what are the key areas that you feel in the IBM's cloud strategy that you would like to highlight for the audience?
Yeah, so Prabhakar, when you talk about the IBM Cloud, a lot of people think about it as just your everyday cloud, right? I mean, it's infrastructure as you need it, a set of PaaS services, and certainly we have all of that. But I think what we've done a few things, a little different and pretty special, I would say, right? A couple of them on the usage side and how people would consume it, and one in the technology that we've chosen to build it. So, we're like any other hyperscaler. We've got these the infrastructure as a service, modern infrastructure as a service, 190 plus API-driven cloud-native PaaS services that you could write any application on. So we have all of that, right? But a couple of things that we've really put our focus on is one of them is security and confidential computing, right? For example, I as a cloud service provider, IBM as a cloud service provider, when customers bring their data or bring their customers and their customers' data to our cloud, we as a cloud service providers don't have access to the data. And that's because we've got some pretty specialized HSM hardware that's the highest level of FIPS 140 rating, FIPS 140-2 level 4. Everybody else has level 3, right? So it's tamper-proof. So that, along with a few other things, make our cloud leaders in confidential computing, right? The second thing I would say is our focus on industry verticals, right? We work with people like Bank of America and BNP Paribas, et cetera, to essentially build preventative and compensatory controls in our cloud. So when you as a bank deploy your applications to our cloud, you have a good regulatory posture and a compliance posture without having to do all of the manual things that go towards getting it. And there's a lot more to that, right? And we've systemically de-risked third and fourth party SaaS providers, because when you talk to banks, they mitigate risk of what they put on clouds by choosing to put applications that don't have the highly confidential data bearing apps on the cloud. Now, that's a risk mitigation strategy, although your return on investment is going to be low because the bulk of your bank's apps have highly confidential data with PII, but at least you're able to manage risk. With the fintechs that they do business with, things like mortgage applications, et cetera, there's no more sensitive data than goes into a mortgage application. Your life history is there. And there's no control over where that runs. and their same customers are exposed to that. So we worked with Bank of America to systemically de-risk that for their third and fourth party vendors by building those compliance controls on our cloud. So when they run on our cloud, Bank of America can go and tell its customers, hey, it's running on this cloud. We know what's running there. It's safe,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So those are two things we've done on the consumption side, and then we have the telco cloud, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
From a technology perspective, we went all in on Kubernetes, right? I described our cloud to you, hyperscaler. Our control plane is a set of containers that is orchestrated by Kubernetes. Our 190 API-driven PaaS services, all containerized, orchestrated by Kube. And why is this important? It's important because people have realized the biggest bang for the buck on clouds is application modernization, right? Not rewriting everything from scratch.
Right.
And when you do application modernization, containerization is a large part of that, right? Some you'll refactor and containerize, some you'll just take it and you'll containerize it because you may not have the source code, whatever, right? So I'm asking my consumers and clients to use the same technology that I've built my cloud on. And what makes that special is, like any cloud service provider, I have to be lights out, completely automated, day two operations, et cetera. And since my cloud is built on Kube, when you use our cloud to modernize your application, you inherit all those qualities of service, right? So that's what makes it special.
Excellent. So confidential computing, I like the ring of that. So that's nice. And the mortgage thing that you mentioned, that's kind of like rings true, because I just completed, like a refinancing in this low interest rate environment. So all the data that I had to supply, I can absolutely identify with what you said. So, like if you take IBM, right? Historically, IBM has been really strong with enterprises. That's kind of like the strength, and maybe service providers too. But so how is that playing into how IBM is approaching the public cloud, hybrid cloud? How are you approaching that, say, vis-a-vis that may be different from the other cloud providers?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Prabakar, because when I was at the bank, right, when we started to refactor apps and put them up on public cloud, you figure that you can move about 20%, and then you start hitting brick walls because sometimes you're not comfortable putting it up on cloud. Sometimes you need to leave your data behind. There are latency issues. And sometimes regulators simply don't like it, depending on the geography that you're in. So very quickly, all the banks have realized that they need a good hybrid strategy, right? And they need a very consistent way of running cloud on-prem as well as on public cloud. So that's what we've done with our hybrid cloud strategy, right? We've taken our public cloud and we have something called the IBM Cloud Satellite, which essentially takes our services. And it's based on OpenShift, right? So Kubernetes, right? The basis is Kubernetes. We can land it anywhere. We can land it on-prem. We can land it on one of the other cloud service providers. We can land it on the edge center, and we can manage it centrally from the control plane in the IBM Public Cloud. But the second issue there is, just landing Kubernetes is not good enough. It's a great platform to run on. Any application needs a rich set of application enablers, your PaaS services, for example, right? As well. But because our cloud is built on Kubernetes and containerized, I can take those services in my public cloud services catalog and I can land them anywhere, right? And if you think about IBM's heritage and the enterprise customers that you talked about, we have sold billions and billions and billions of dollars of middleware, right?
Right.
And what we've done, and that's essentially software, what we've done with that middleware, whether it's WebSphere or DB2 or whatever it is, right? We have modernized it by, again, containerizing it with OpenShift. And these are self-contained things called Cloud Paks, which we're now building as a service as well. So you can take what was originally software that our enterprise customers have, and you can run that as software on-prem if you want, or you can run it as a service on any one of the clouds or as a service on-prem as well, right? So now you have a very consistent way of managing your application regardless of where it runs. A consistent security model, management model, deployment model, development model, because the same bits are running everywhere, right? And a single compliance model as well. So that's the power of what we've built.
Yeah, I was midway through, I was smiling because you mentioned IBM WebSphere, and just wanted to let you know some of my code may still be running in that because I did the transaction services with Transarc for WebSphere on Windows NT. So
did you really? Did you work for Transarc?
I work for Transarc, yeah.
Oh, wow. So you're an ex-IBMer then.
Yes, I am an ex-IBMer for sure. Some of those conversations were really hilarious. Maybe offside, we can talk about it sometime.
Over a beer, maybe, yes.
Yes, that would be nice. So, yeah, I think, so that's a very key thing that you mentioned. And you mentioned this confidential computing and the HSM. I know that there are, and you've been on both sides, and several financial customers, especially in healthcare, have been very nervous about their data on the cloud. You mentioned one aspect of it, which is HSM, but there are other security aspects, compliance, regulations. How are you assuring them that they can be safe having this hybrid cloud spanning public cloud and their own data center?
Yeah, so I actually mentioned a few, right? One was the HSM. One is the fact that we built these compliance controls into our infrastructure and our services, et cetera. So, what people don't know is when you come to our cloud and you ask for the keep your own key service, which gives you this highly compliant HSM, it's actually based on a mainframe, right? And enterprises trust mainframes, but you're using it as a service, right? So we can use that same hardware as a service to run enclaves of secure containers or secure VMs where you've encapsulating it with basically encryption where you can get through, right? Which is why we as cloud service providers can't really get through, even when customers run. That along with the fact that we leverage Intel SGX, we work with company like Fortanix, right? So most cloud companies, when you use SGX, the developer has to be knowledgeable about how to use SGX. They have to change their application code to actually use those Intel secure enclaves, right? But our solution with Fortanix is it makes it transparent to the developer, right? So those are the kinds of things that we're doing. We run database as a service in those secure enclaves, whether it's in our key protect or keep your own key, rather, I should say, or in this SGX enclaves. So we're able to do things like that other cloud service providers are not able to do, right? Because you know that everyone used to call it trusted computing, and then people figured out you really can't trust anything or anybody. So confidential computing really means I know you're going to break in, but when you do break into my front door, what can I do to make sure that my data is still safe? That's what confidential computing is all about.
Right. That elaboration is what I was looking for. So thank you very much for that. So now you mentioned that almost all of your environment is based on Cube, and then your customers are refactoring some of them container based and all of that. So how are you approaching the cloud native applications observability? How is approaching this area? And obviously we have OpsCruise, a company that's targeting that space. So how can we collaborate on that? Any thoughts?
Yeah, so I did meet with Scott. His name is Scott, right? The CEO?
Yes, Scott.
Yeah, so I did meet with Scott. We've got another upcoming meeting with him as well. And so we're going to continue to look at, the secret sauce that he has. But to answer your question in the IBM Cloud, so we've done a few things. One is we have a large organic AI ops and AI effort in general, right? AI everywhere, whether it's in operations, whether it's, to provide it as a user consumable service, what have you. So we're doing all of that. From an observability perspective, we've made a couple of acquisitions recently. Instana is one of them, right? We're going to infuse a lot of AI into that as well. And then more recently, we purchased Turbonomics, which basically says, how do you ensure your application running on the infrastructure has adequate amount of resources, right? And there is a lot of predictability built into that, and we want to infuse more AI into that as well. So both from an observability perspective as well as a resource management perspective and AI ops, they all kind of come together as a good story for us.
Right, excellent. Yeah. So that's a good explanation. So you mentioned very quickly, touched upon the edge cloud, the satellite. I know that competitors are all, stampeding to telcos to partner and provide their cloud services on the edge. Can you elaborate on how you are working with the satellite and the telcos on the edge side of it?
Yeah, I can't really throw out a name because I don't have the permission to reference it on a public call like this.
Mm-hmm.
But we are working with telcos in the U.S. as well as Europe, and in fact India as well, where we're landing satellite on their edge locations, right? We're able to land these cloud packs on the edge locations, which provide you rich processing capabilities on the information that you're collecting there. Right. If you want to write a cloud native application, we can land parts of our public cloud service catalog there as well. We've built something called the Edge Application Manager, which kind of manages all these resources together, right? So we're landing rich platforms based on our public cloud services catalog, satellite, our cloud packs, and this Edge Application Manager. So people can innovate and stand up apps at the edge without having to go to the central cloud location for everything. So that's really how we're doing it.
I see. Okay, that's good. So if you look at, kind of like we are starting to gain some control over pandemic, at least in the US, maybe not in the other areas of the world. So during this time, the normal way of working has been distributed, remote working that may change somewhat. So people are accessing these cloud applications from they are almost from any place. And how are you thinking about it in terms of providing delivery to the of these applications to those end users wherever they are with the high quality of service and all of that? Have you been doing anything?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, right? I remember my conversation with one of Global Bank's cloud transformation officer, and that person was telling me, with the pandemic hitting in the first 4 to 6 weeks, he got permission from his CISO and the chief risk officer to move more applications to the cloud than he had the entire 4 years preceding the pandemic, right? So the pandemic just absolutely showed people the need to be able to do that transformation in the cloud because you can access it from anywhere.
Yeah.
So obviously having good bandwidth, direct network connections, etc., and then using internet service providers for the last mile into people's homes is very important. But it's also the pattern of usage, right? Initially, we saw softness in things like the obvious places, the airline industry, rental cars, hotels, etc., specialty retail, etc. But other things like groceries, your common everyday retail, the virtual desktop interface to work better at home, all those things started going through the roof because people needed to do it from wherever they were.
Right.
So, after a little blip, we saw business take off and doing much better. And, on a lighter vein, I'll tell you that when people started working from home, working was not the only thing they were doing because my gaming industry revenue started to go on the uptick as well. So,
makes sense. Yeah. As Apple also experienced this dramatic spurt in revenue, right?
Yeah.
So, so that would be a conversation that we can probably take forward offline as well. So, I referred to the fact that you have been on both sides of the fence when we got started with your background. You have been on IBM for a long time, but you also have been an enterprise IT exec with Chase. So, can you give an audience some tips on what works for somebody on the enterprise IT exec to take up, especially a new company that is starting up?
Yeah, so it was an eye-opening experience for me, and I got a lot from my foray into banking for sure, right? I figured when I took that job, I said, look, I have produced software technology and cloud for almost my entire career, and I worked with, except for the first 2 years where I was too junior, I worked with customers my entire life, getting them to adopt what we had built, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm going to go to the other side and consume what we've built. How hard can that be, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be easy, and especially with cloud, there are so many cloud service providers. They're all good choices. I'll just pick a cloud, aim people to it, train them, and they're off to the races, right? So the learning for me was that was a very naive belief on my part, right? Because you have to deal with things like risk and compliance, and you're dealing with trillions of dollars of money that don't belong to you, and you have to be very conscientious of how you take applications to the cloud, right? So that was the understanding that or the learning that I got. The other thing that I also got was, having come from a technology vendor perspective and now consuming it, I said, look, we make things way too hard, way too complicated with all the things we talk about and describe. Because if I'm sitting in a bank and I'm a line of business, I want to write an application that either does a trade or opens an account, or basically feeds the regulators the records that they need to see that everything is kosher. It's as simple as that, right? So don't go and start talking about all the bells and whistles and the intricacies and the complexities of the technology. Tell people in simple terms, how do you use the technology to solve your business problems? So that was the other eye opener for me as well.
That's very interesting from like a IT exec perspective. Now to turn the coin, our audience are entrepreneurs, a lot of young companies, and they want to also work with giants like IBM, and especially on the cloud side of it. Any words of advice on what it takes, for what IBM is looking for in partners to to work with in the market?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, Prabakar. I mean, this, and I'm going to get to that example here in a bit. But you know, I don't care how big a company you are. You could be the 800-pound gorilla in your space, but if you don't have a rich ecosystem of ISV SaaS providers that are providing rich content for people to consume on your cloud, you're not going to really succeed, right? So the ecosystem is so important.
Right.
And we did business with you. Spanago was backed by you, and we acquired Spanago, right? And Spanago served a very specialized need of taking all these compliance controls that we built in our cloud and giving you the way to dashboard it and measure for drift and correct drift
Yeah.
and things of that nature. So as much as we understand the enterprise space, banking being a large avenue of business for us, we saw the value in Spanago and something that we did not do, so we got it from you. So understanding the ecosystem, understanding what enterprises need, right, and basically complementing these cloud technologies is what I would tell entrepreneurs and startups to think about.
So thank you, Harish. I think we are kind of like in the wrap-up mode now. It was really enlightening to get your insights. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabakar. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you all for watching another episode of Spotlight. We'll make more for you. Bye.